Dustborn is a game I wasn't aware of until recently. Not until one lazy Saturday afternoon when I was listening to some music on my phone and browsing through the upcoming section of the Xbox Live game store. Immediately, the art style grabbed me, reminding me of the comic books I used to read as a kid. The bright colors were beautiful, especially when compared to the dull browns, blacks, and reds of the other games that I was currently playing at this time. The game looked interesting, a group of teenagers on the run who all have superpowers hiding out and pretending to be a traveling band in hopes of making it out of the United States. Color me intrigued. So I went online and looked up some more trailers about this game, and that's when I saw them. Dozens of videos and shorts, declaring Dustborn a travesty, part of the social justice agenda, the most woke game ever made, all before the game had ever even been released. Now, I try not to weigh in on certain subjects. As a white middle-class male in America, I understand that my position in society is pretty comfortable, even if I didn't ask for it to be. Growing up, I was always taught the golden rule: do unto others as you would wish them to do unto you. Because of this, I do my best to present myself as a kind and pleasant person to be around in my day-to-day life. When confronted with an issue, I try to understand both sides of it, and if possible, come to a reasonable compromise that satisfies both parties. I don't subscribe to the belief that for one person to succeed means another person has to fail, and it is my personal belief that if you see someone struggling, you should at least try to help them if you are able to do so. Politically, I suppose that makes me a liberal, though personally I identify more as an independent and somewhat jokingly as a stoner. I'll be honest, I don't really understand woke culture. To me, it's just a group of people who are hypersensitive about a subject and feel that everyone else should be too. Things like using a person's desired pronouns, including individuals of various races, ethnicities, and genders in all activities, and calling out anything that might be deemed harmful or offensive to anyone for any reason. To me, the Console-Fennec, that is what it means to be woke, and in some ways, I don't mind it. If someone were to tell me, "Hey Fennec, I'd be a lot happier if you called me her or she," my response would be to shrug and say, "Okay, I'll try to remember that." Because if this person feels comfortable enough to tell me this, I assume that means we're friends. And as their friend, I would of course try to make them feel just a little bit happier by obliging that request. And yet, when I look at Dustborn and watch its trailers, I don't really get any kind of woke vibe from it. Honestly, it reminds me of the old X-Men comics, with maybe a dash of Young Justice thrown in there, both of which were some of my favorite TV shows and stories growing up as a kid. It reminds me of any number of coming-of-age stories I've read growing up, and it also reminds me of countless rebel against the unjust slogans I've heard shouted at rock concerts or graffitied on the inside of bathroom stalls. But is this game woke? Some people certainly think so. Some people believe hard enough that they have actually made their own videos about it to argue their points. Me personally, I don't know. But seeing how this is a game I wanted to play, I can't help but feel some kind of obligation to address the controversy around it, if for no other reason than professional courtesy to you, the viewers, as to search for this video means you probably also saw the same videos I did, decrying this game as woke. I'm going to do something a little different with this video, however. Since this game is split up into different chapters, I'm going to do a series of shorter videos and focus each video on just 2 chapter segments of the story, sprinkling in my own thoughts and commentary in between as I usually do. Then I'll link all the videos together in a single playlist, and who knows, maybe when I'm done I'll edit them all together into a single super long video. Also, for my own peace of mind as well as an attempt to be proactive, I'm going to disable the comments of this video, as I have absolutely zero doubts that certain people will say pretty nasty things there if I so much as say a single kind thing about this game. So with all that in mind, let's explore this game together, its strengths and its flaws, as well as the controversy surrounding it. Please keep in mind that I am by no means an expert on any of the subjects covered in this video, and that if you disagree with my conclusions or thoughts on any of the video's subjects, that is okay. Dustborn starts us off in the thick of things, with our starting cast being crammed in an SUV driving down the highway after having performed some kind of heist. While our main character, a young woman named Pax, reflects on the events that led them here as a method to cope with the pain from a gunshot wound to her arm. A flashback to a few days ago has us introduced a little more to these characters in the car, as well as the circumstances that led them here. Theo, the man in the back who hasn't said a word, approached Pax, Sai, and Naum with an offer. Help him steal something from a group called the Puritans, and in exchange, they'd not only be paid a lot of money, but be smuggled out of the country to Nova Scotia. We also learn that while Theo is a normal human, Pax, Sai, and Naum are what are called anomals. That is to say, people who have some kind of superpower that relates to their voice in some way. Pax, for example, is able to use various words and exclamations to force a person to feel a specific way, or to trigger certain effects on them. Naum, on the other hand, is able to gaslight people, tricking them into thinking the words she is saying are true, even when they are not. And Sai, well, I'm not really sure how it relates to her voice, but Sai is able to turn her body to stone basically at will, which gives her superhuman strength and endurance. Though it can also flare up when she becomes anxious and nervous, and in her everyday life kind of makes it look like she has plaque psoriasis. Not that that's important, it's just a side effect. As the flashback ends, the crew starts to settle down, the adrenaline from their semi-successful heist starting to wear off. We even managed to get in a short sing-along with the car radio before the sight of flashing lights behind us shatters the moment of hopeful peace. Using our powers, we managed to convince Sai to pull over, as simply making a run for it will make this situation infinitely worse. When the police officer asks us to step out of the car, I lean on Naum, thinking her powers would be more useful than my own to defuse this situation, since her powers are more like a whisper and mine are basically a psychic sledgehammer. Unfortunately for us, though, this cop must have training or something in recognizing when he's being influenced externally, because he immediately draws his gun and demands that we step out of the car while stepping away from us. It's too bad that he doesn't have better situational awareness, though, as when he steps back and takes aim, he's creamed by an auto-driving Amazon truck. Stepping on the gas, our group continues on our way and eventually arrives at our destination, an underground silo farm called La Torre. Pulling into the garage, we find that our vehicle is not the only one here, as there's also a pretty sweet-looking old-style tour bus that seems to be doing its best to crush the poor mechanic who's working on it. Taking control of the main character Pax, we run around and quickly piece together a solution. First, have Now gaslight the woman into not panicking. Secondly, have Sai help hold up the bus with her superhuman strength. Third, have Theo take a look at the auto jack and figure out why it's not working. And then once we understand why, dashing to a nearby terminal to discover a drone that has crashed into the terminal and has broken the antenna. Repairing things sees us able to pull the lady out from under the bus, who introduces herself as Luna, part of the secret underground resistance network called the Weave, and our first point of contact in our upcoming adventure. Descending into the silo farm sees Pax breaking off from the main group to use the bathroom, and while vomiting, Pax finds herself zoning out, or perhaps mentally projecting into some kind of astral environment, where she sees visions of a large growing tree and an old sign for some city called Lebanon. She then has a vision of a strange pale boy, but wakes up before the two of them can interact. Leaving the bathroom, we're given the chance to wander around for a bit. Pointing out that we need to treat the bullet wound in our shoulder, Luna leads us away and sets us up in a nearby chair, before strapping a piece of advanced-looking tech to our arm called an auto-dock, which begins to repair the damage to our arm almost instantly. As it works, we're given a chance to ask a few questions about the resistance, as well as to explain a few things to Luna about anomals. But as the auto-dock works, the alarm starts to sound, signaling that law enforcement has arrived on scene. Luna goes out to speak with them as Pax and Theo watch through the cameras. Theo points out that this must be a random search, as if they actually knew that they were there, the entire facility would be crawling with officers, rather than the two officers and the one uniformed purifier soldier that we see on the monitor. Running to check on Sai and Naum, we find Sai having a bit of a panic attack in the bathroom, while Naum tries to talk her out of it without using her powers. Trying to be diplomatic, I choose to listen to Sai as she spirals for a bit, and it's here that I do feel a tiny bit shoehorned into using my powers on her. Also, in a small tangent, why is it so important for us to stop her from having this freak out in the bathroom? Like, I get it, the situation is bad, and having a girl who can turn herself to stone panicking is not a good thing, but the police are upstairs and can't hear us, so long as they don't come down here, I don't see what the issue is. Anywho, we blast Sai with our off-brand dragon shout and get her to stop spiraling by force. As the alarm stops blaring, Pax takes a moment to pick up a new shirt as well. Eventually, Luna comes over the loudspeakers and tells us that the coast is clear, but we need to get moving now. Heading back to the elevator, we grab a box of supplies and head topside to help load the bus. From there, Pax has a little mini tantrum when she learns that a robot will have to be their tour bus driver, and it's here that Naum actually uses her powers against us, the player, slowly gaslighting and stripping away our resistance until we have no choice but to accept the situation. Normally, I'll admit I might find this annoying, but it occurs to me that I just did the same thing to Sai like 5 minutes ago, so I have zero moral authority to complain about what she's doing. Climbing on the bus, the group sets out and Pax takes a moment to do a little songwriting, before talking to the group and saying that she wants to alter their travel plans slightly so she can visit her family one last time, as well as run a secret mission that she's keeping hidden from others for now. Unhappy with the change of plans, Theo and the group protest but relent when Pax mentions her sister is also an anomal and that Pax wants to bring her with them to escape. When they arrive at the border of the American Republic, the Border Patrol stops them and after demanding to see their papers, hauls everyone off the bus and forces them to perform in order to keep up appearances that they are a band. Luckily, Pax has written a song previously while traveling on the bus, and my skill at rhythm games are decent enough that not only do the Border Patrols believe our cover story, but they actually become minor fans of ours. Sorry sir, no autographs for fascist cops. Passing the checkpoint, the group crosses into the American Republic, and soon enough after some driving, it's time to call it a night, where the group decides to pull over into some campgrounds rather than draw attention to themselves by driving at night. As we nibble on hot dogs and give Theo crap for not knowing what a s'more is, I decide to spend some time mending the fences I've been pressuring today. I chat with Sai about using my voice on her, and she says that she gets it. We apologize to Theo about the change in travel plans, and we spend a surprisingly tender moment with Naum while admitting we're grateful that she's coming along with us. We also go off a little ways and reflect on how we feel about going home before deciding to call it a night and heading to the bus to sleep. One aspect of Dustborn that I really enjoyed was the alternative timeline and history that the game plays around with and uses as the main pivot point for its setting. In the world of Dustborn, 3 major events have occurred that have shaped and defined the world that we are currently experiencing. The first event, and the main pivot point for this setting's history, is that the bullet fired by Lee Harvey Oswald did not kill JFK, but instead killed his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy. In response to this, Kennedy formed the Federal Department of Justice, a kind of national task force that seems to be a combination of the military and the FBI, which he basically used as a peacekeeping force within the United States during his remaining years as president. During that time, he also remarried, turning Marilyn Monroe into the new First Lady of the United States. When his presidency was over, Kennedy attempted to repeal the Department of Justice, but was stopped by the incoming president, a man named Baron Sadler, who used the department as their own personal extrajudicial police force before being replaced by Samuel Ward, who used the task force as a way to leverage control against his political rivals and enemies, as well as the country at large, effectively turning the United States into an authoritarian police state. Officially, the American Republic is still a democracy that holds open elections every 4 years, but dialogue in the game hints that it's not uncommon for the rivals of the current or sitting president to go missing or to be swept up in some huge career-ending scandal days before the election. The second major event of this game occurred in the year 2000 and is officially called the Broadcast, which was a mysterious signal that came from somewhere in the middle of the United States. This strange and unknown signal was able to hijack every cell phone, TV, and radio station in the country, and broadcasted a strange language that induced an almost instant wave of fear, panic, paranoia, and anger in anyone who heard it. Riots followed, and for days and weeks after the broadcast, cities all over the country struggled to handle violent mobs of their own citizens, many of whom had never been violent before in their lives. In the end, the riots were put down and order was restored, but enough damage had been done that nothing would ever be the same as it was. Some cities had been so damaged by the violence that they were basically uninhabitable and had to be abandoned. Some people, fearing another broadcast might happen, began to shun technology, leaving the city in groups to live in the empty countryside or else in small techno-privative communities and communes. Officially, these communities are still part of the United States, but for many of the people living in them, the concept of being part of a unified country is not something they think about, with their only contact with the United States being the occasional raid from justice forces. Not really a major event, but more a side effect of the broadcast, about a year or so later, saw the first emergence of deviants or anomals starting to appear. These are people who were affected by the broadcast and somehow gained the ability to speak in the language that the broadcast used. Of course, their appearance was not met with welcoming arms, as many people were still reeling from the effects of the broadcast, with some even believing that anomals were the cause of the original broadcast, and thus viewed them with outright hostility, despite anomals having been completely normal people prior to hearing the strange signal. Officially, the American Republic's position on anomals is that they are dangerous individuals who are to be reported to justice right away so they can be contained and monitored, which is a fancy way of saying arrested and thrown in jail with no trial or jury. The final major event in the timeline happened a few years after the broadcast, with several states seceding from the American Republic. The largest state to secede was California, which formed its own nation called Pacifica, which it sold as a land of opportunity where anyone could make it if they were willing to do the hard work. In reality, the nation is a techno-authoritarian oligarchy, with tech bros and wealthy elites controlling things at the top, while the majority of the population struggle to get by working gig economy jobs that offer no benefits or prospects for the future, with the only full-time jobs that seem to exist being when you work for the government. Currently, tensions between the American Republic and Pacifica are running pretty high. Both sides are wary enough not to do anything that would outright trigger a war with the other, but it's also clear that both sides are preparing for that eventuality. Some in-game info you can find gives the slight edge to the American Republic just because of the sheer number of soldiers they have, while Pacifica relies mostly on its robots and automated military forces, as well as a few anomals they've managed to trick or brainwash into fighting on their behalf. Officially, being an anomal in Pacifica isn't outright illegal like it is in the American Republic, but the reality is that suspected and proven anomals are routinely rounded up and shipped off to detention centers and prison camps, or else just disappear entirely. All in all, I really dig this alternative timeline. JFK surviving his assassination attempt is a really interesting pivot point to the world's history, and I love how that single event changed everything that followed. I find it equal parts interesting and sad that he formed the Department of Justice as a means to protect the population, and now, all these years later, it's become an oppressive and authoritarian police force. I find it fascinating how, absent an agreeable and appealing unifying American culture, different groups of people split off and formed their own tribes and factions, some of which cling to a version of the modern world, while others have regressed to a pre-modern, almost pagan-style way of life. Other groups became nomadic and barbaric, inventing new ways of life out in the open and empty America, while other people followed their religious beliefs and formed new communities around that. Slight spoiler here, but we'll actually get to see the realization of an in-real-life movement that in our own timeline failed, the construction of New Jerusalem in the Salt Lake City region. This exploration of an America divided and oppressed is fascinating to me. It sort of has the feeling of a well-known song played in the wrong key and with the lyrics changed. You know what they should be, but what's being presented to you is not what you know. Like if you were to play Rascal Flatts' Life is a Highway, change the tune instead to blues, and make it about how staying home is the best thing you can do. While you'd probably recognize the tune, everything else about it is wrong. As the game progresses, I have no doubt that we'll encounter new and strange sights, recognizable iconography of our in-real-life America that has been twisted and warped by this new timeline, and I'm all in for it. As we sleep, we have a pretty unsettling dream about the same pale boy who says that the powers we have were never meant for us, but he vanishes before we can question him. Waking up, we find out that we're no longer alone in the campgrounds, and that a group known as Horned Riders are demanding that we give them the bus. Think Mad Max diesel punkers and you know all you really need to know about them. Combat in Dustborn is a bit clunky. Pax can attack using a bat or with her Vox, with standard attacks from her bat charging her vocal powers with every hit. I'll go into greater detail about the combat in another video, but for now, I personally think it's serviceable. I've certainly played worse. Some of the ambient dialogue can be a bit cringy, especially when Pax taunts an enemy, but I could say the same thing about combat in some cartoons and animes, so I'm willing to give it a pass for now. With the Horde Riders defeated, we herd everyone back onto the bus and continue on our way to the Community of Liberty, Pax's old home, which turns out to be an old Justice re-education camp for children that was abandoned after an uprising and was later repurposed into a small community of techno-anarcho primitives. At least that's what the robot called us the night before. When we arrive at Liberty, we can instantly tell that something is off. The place isn't as we remembered it. The gates that were normally always open have been closed and locked. Not only that, but as we get nearer, we notice that some strange, almost pagan-esque symbols have been drawn on the gates, warning outsiders to stay away. Meanwhile, pretty much everyone comments on the creepy singing they can hear coming from inside the camp, giving the whole scene a very folk horror vibe, as Sai and Naum point out. Small tangent here, but it's never actually really explained where the singing is coming from, as later, when we do gain access to Liberty, we see no one singing, so I find that a little sus. Remembering a hidden way the teenagers used to use to sneak out at night, Pax goes to open this way only to encounter a giant robot who easily steps over the wall and demands to know who we are. Thinking he can help, our robot driver steps up only to be grabbed by the larger robot and disabled, with the larger robot saying he was defective and didn't think right. Which, if I'm honest, is only adding to the folk horror vibes, as I've certainly heard other robots use that justification to start killing before. The giant robot asks that we remain where we are before climbing back over the wall. Not being one for standing around, Pax opens the hidden way into Liberty and works to secure it while Naum heads inside, only to encounter an armed red-headed woman demanding to know who she is and how she got there. When the woman sees us, she recognizes us and says that her name is Fred and that we used to bully her all the time when they were kids. Sure enough, Pax remembers her and uses that to talk their way into Liberty, at least for now, under the guise of finding their mom, Annie. Before we go, Naum warns us that this place feels very wrong to her, that there's a lot of negative emotions boiling just under the surface. Taking that to heart, I decide to hurry and find Pax's mom, who we find a ways inside the compound at her partner's grave. Talking with her, Pax apologizes for missing the funeral before explaining the situation and asking where her sister is. Pax's mother is less than happy to see us, however. Turns out, things haven't been so great around the commune lately, though she does tell us that Ziggy, Pax's younger sister, is still around, though she doesn't know where Ziggy is currently. Checking Ziggy and Pax's old home, Pax has a flashback to when they were children and used to hide things under the floorboards of the then bunkhouse. Sadly, when she pulls up the loose board, she doesn't find what she's looking for. Searching around the camp has Pax commenting how things have changed. Not only are there robots now, but some of the people in the camp are carrying guns. Additionally, they've built a large effigy in the center of the town to someone they call She Who Walks, which appears to be some kind of pagan-esque deity. And I've seen enough horror media to know that communities that have effigies like this are never sunshine and rainbows. Continuing our search, we find Naum talking with Annie up by the old schoolhouse, while Fred tries futilely to pull a heavy bell up to the roof. We decide to show her how it's done, by asking Sai to do it, which she does with one or two good yanks, causing the bell to ring and giving Pax another flashback to when she was younger. This flashback is a little long and tedious, but does help to jog Pax's memory about a hidden fort she and Ziggy used to play at. And sure enough, when she comes to the crumbling remains of the fort, Pax finds her sister Ziggy. However, the reunion with our sister doesn't go as planned, as Ziggy is instantly hostile and angry at us, accusing us of running off in the night without her, before using her Vox to superspeed past us. Another flashback triggers. This flashback, however, is more important than the others, and explains that by using a small device called a meme, and a special game cartridge, Pax is able to detect these strange things called echoes, which are sort of like leftover remnants of the broadcast from years before. Being around them can cause a person to become paranoid, withdrawn, and confused, but more alarmingly, they can actually infect people and turn them violent, despite how they may have been previously. Using the meme device, Child Pax is able to locate and filter out the echoes using a small minigame before finding her sister Ziggy and freeing her from the influence of one of these echoes. Back in the real world, Pax chases after Ziggy but runs into Annie, who lets slip that the commune has started to grow poppy flowers, which they are then refining into morphine to sell to the other communities. Understandably upset, Pax confronts Annie about this, but also over Ziggy's attitude, and learns that Annie and her late wife never actually told Ziggy the real circumstances of Pax leaving the commune, only that she left one day and wasn't coming back. Confronting Ziggy in the camp kitchen has Pax trying to explain that she didn't just run away, that she was sent away by Annie and their mom. But Ziggy doesn't believe her, and to make matters worse, Pax then asks about her old meme device, which Ziggy correctly figures out is partially why Pax came back in the first place. Angry and hurt, Ziggy gives Pax the meme device and tells her to leave. However, when we do, we're confronted by Fred and another girl. When we try to talk them down, Fred attacks us, pushing us down the stairs while accusing us of putting words in her head. Realizing what's going on, Pax guesses that the echoes are back and are affecting people in the camp. And sure enough, when she boots up the meme and the special game cartridge, we find that there are several echoes around the camp. Getting to work, we ghostbust a few of the echoes before suddenly being accosted by a kind of ethereal squid that attacks one of the echoes and drags it into a part of the camp away from us. Having felt the disturbance in the force, Sai comes along and witnesses us battling the squid as it tries to consume the echo that we have found. Afterwards, when Sai demands answers, we, the player, get a bit more concrete explanation of what exactly is going on and what these echoes are. For the most part, it's nothing we haven't already figured out, but Pax does reveal one interesting detail, that once she records and banishes enough echoes, she's able to somehow remix them on her meme device, and as a result is able to learn new ways to use her Vox powers, essentially learning new words. To demonstrate this, after finding and banishing a few more echoes, Pax learns the power of Discord, which allows her to turn people against each other temporarily. Returning to Annie, we find that Fred has gathered a mob and is demanding that Annie be removed as leader of the commune. Initially, I try to talk the mob down, but when logic doesn't work, I'm forced to use my Vox to turn everyone against Fred. Remembering what we've learned, I whip out my meme and find that indeed one of the echoes has attached itself to Fred. And after pulling it off of her, Fred becomes noticeably calmer, but not completely. As the crowd disperses, Annie and Pax talk and discuss what to do next. Pax is adamant that she wants Ziggy to come with them and make their escape together. Annie doesn't think Ziggy will go for that, but she does admit that it's Ziggy's choice to make, not hers. Directing us to Ziggy's workshop, Annie says that the last time she saw Ziggy, she was working to repair our robot that had been damaged earlier. And sure enough, when we make our way down to the workshop, Ziggy is indeed there, working on our robot and muttering to herself. Confronting Ziggy in her workshop, Pax and her sister talk for a bit before the perimeter alarm starts to go off, signaling approaching Justice forces. Sure enough, when we leave the workshop, we find that a Justice troop carrier is hovering above the camp, while automated robots order everyone to stand down and prepare to be arrested. To help fight off the Justice troops, Ziggy directs Pax to use a bat that she's especially modified using magnets to return to her when she throws it. Which, if I'm honest, I like quite a bit. If it's good enough for Kratos, it's good enough for me. Putting the smackdown on Justice troops, we battle through a dozen or so of them before Sai shows up, and we learn about combo attacks, where we can prime an enemy for a follow-up attack from one of our allies. Again, combat isn't difficult, and in some ways feels very button-mashy as you combo, Vox Blast, and taunt your way through the enemies Justice throws at you. At one point, they even sick a big Enforcer guy on you, but a few minutes later and he falls to the ground just like everyone else. That's when Justice stops playing around and manages to reactivate one of the old education camp's security bots. This guy's a much bigger threat than the soldiers, being able to cover the battlefield in mines, as well as fly around and take chunks out of our health with his basic attacks. Beating him isn't crazy hard, but he's definitely the hardest enemy we've fought thus far. As we fight, we see another troop transport ship using a flamethrower to burn what are presumably the poppy fields the commune had been growing. And it's here that the game throws one final enemy at us, a sniper, who will basically take pod shots at us until we complete a quick-time event that sees Ziggy throwing a baseball to us, and us hitting it just right so that it strikes the engine of the troop transport and causes it to crash. Which, while it did get a slight chuckle out of me, also had me rolling my eyes at the same time. Rushing back to Annie, we find that indeed the poppy fields have been burned, and the commune is preparing to leave and flee into the countryside to try and escape the horde of justice soldiers that are no doubt coming this way. In a scene that admittedly takes a bit longer than I'd have personally liked, Annie and Pax tell Ziggy the whole story about why Pax left the commune all those years ago. When they were teenagers, Pax had come across a group of kids who wanted to hurt Ziggy, and in an attempt to protect her sister, Pax used their Vox on them. This caused the kids to go running to their parents, which ran the risk of one of them ratting out Pax and the Liberty Commune to justice. So to spare everyone, Annie and Pax's mom sent her away to Pacifica, hoping that the life in the big city would be a better life for her. Annie also says that she agrees with Pax's idea of taking Ziggy with us, and even goes so far as to order Ziggy to go with us. After saying our goodbyes, we get on the bus and do our best to look nonchalant as we drive down the road while several armored justice vehicles speed past us on their way to Liberty. A quick fade in and out, and suddenly the group is at their first official gig as a band, playing in some dive bar. It goes pretty good, again my skills at the rhythm game allowing me to make a few fans out of the bar's patrons before the scene again fades to black. Later that night, the group stops at another campground and we're given a chance to talk to everyone about what happened and how they feel. Theo is surprisingly understanding about everything that's happened, though he does point out that we're supposed to be a team, which means we have to be able to trust each other. Because of that, I decide to let Theo know a little bit more about Meme and that Nova Scotia is going to offer me even more money for it. Sai is doing okay. She's wearing a hijab and mentions needing to pray at one point, a clear indication of her Muslim faith. Also, for anyone who missed it or doesn't know what it meant, in the previous campground she asked if the sausages were halal, meaning if they fell within a very strict set of guidelines as outlined by the Quran. Though I will confess I don't know what those guidelines are. Sai and I also chat a bit about her and Pax's relationship and how she feels a little let down that Pax hadn't told her any of this stuff previously, or discussed her family at all. I deflect the situation a little bit by saying it was a pretty messed up and painful thing to talk about, and Sai seems to understand. She's got her own family drama to deal with, mostly the fact that her family thinks she's a monster for being an anomal. When I try to talk to Ziggy, she's just as hostile and standoffish as ever. Even when I try to give her a small gift to remind her of home, she basically tells me to fuck off and that she might be here, but she doesn't want anything to do with me. Talking to Naum has her reflecting on her own home in Hong Kong, and how someday she might want to return, though that would also mean having to address a bunch of emotional baggage she has with her mom. When she asks Pax what she should do, I have Pax say that she should stay here with us, specifically me. Small tangent here, but I really like Naum. Out of all the characters, she seems the most thoughtful and caring, which are valuable traits to a person like me. She kinda has this motherly older sister vibe to her, which I really like, and I can see why she and Pax would be attracted to each other, but also why she and Pax would break up and start the game as exes. With nothing left to say, and me having no desire to practice our music tonight, I direct Pax to head to bed. Overall, I'd say Chapter 1 of Dustborn doesn't exactly have a theme or an overall message. It's mostly an exposition dump, introducing the character and the settings to the player, as well as setting up the concepts and ideas you'll encounter during your playthrough. It introduces you to the characters and their world, and gives you just enough information about them that you can start to understand their points of view and feelings on the various subjects and ideas that you will encounter in your playthrough. Chapter 2, on the other hand, has a few rather heavy themes. Mainly, that nostalgia for the previous way of life can blind a person to the reality of a current situation, and that it can also doom the future as well. Pax was foolish to think that nothing would have changed in her home in 16 years, and that foolishness led her and her friends into a situation that was not only extremely dangerous, but could have potentially cost them not only the mission, but their lives. And while some could argue she did so for mostly selfish and personal reasons, I am going to hold off on judging those actions until we know a bit more about them and how they'll play out. At the same time, I find the dilemma of Liberty to be rather interesting. As Annie explained, due to a particularly hard winter, the commune almost collapsed when several people died. As such, decisions had to be made about how to handle things going forward, and some traditions were broken as the community changed to overcome their new reality. In this case, with the introduction of robots to help tend the crops and make up for the people that did not survive the harsh winter. To some, this was a change they would eventually welcome. After a bit of time, they saw how easy it was and how it had improved their lives. While to others, it was a signal that things were starting to go wrong. A signal that got even louder when Annie started growing poppies to manufacture into morphine to sell to the other communities, effectively turning Liberty into a drug commune. Drugs are a serious problem in our real world. They've destroyed untold lives and brought suffering to the world on a level that I honestly feel dwarfs natural disasters and other catastrophes. There is no questioning that. But I also think that at their core, drugs can serve a helpful purpose when used medicinally and with the appropriate supervision. One could even argue that by producing morphine and not heroin, Annie is trying to produce something that will be of medicinal benefit. Unfortunately, no matter her good intentions, she is still breaking the law and putting a target on the back of the community she is trying to protect. In the end, I don't really have a solution for this situation. If a community dies, it dies. How it dies makes very little difference. Be it a cold death of starvation, a death of gunfire and arrests, or a slow, sickly death of addiction and pain. No option is better than the other, as in the end, the results are the same. So really, it's a no-win situation for anyone. Overall, I enjoyed the first 2 chapters of Dustborn quite a bit. The game has set up an interesting world, with factions and a lore that I definitely want to know more about. The characters are a bit basic at the moment, but this is not one of those games where you can pull aside a character and say, hey, tell me everything about yourself right now so I never need to talk to you again. I have no doubt that these characters will change and evolve over time, maybe for the better, maybe for the worse, but for now, I am enjoying them. While the combat is a bit clunky and basic, I again understand that this is still very much the beginning of the game, and that with any luck, the combat will become smoother the more I play and upgrade the characters, their weapons, and their various abilities, which will definitely be something I will circle back to once I have more information about them. As for the game's before aforementioned wokeness, I'm not really seeing anything glaring as of right now. Yes, the game does tell you a character's preferred pronouns when they join the party, but that's a one-time pop-up as far as I can tell. Additionally, while I will freely admit that the game is written from a left-leaning political perspective, I will also point out that in the context of the setting, this makes perfect sense. These characters are individuals who are treated as second-class citizens and even as criminals through something that is no fault of their own. That is to say, they're having powers. These are not the kind of people to nod and say, you know what, the status quo works and I'm okay with it and have no complaints. They are individuals who would naturally want and seek a way out of this society if it meant having a chance at a better life. So far, my only real complaint about the game has to do with the rhythm sections, as I'm never quite sure how well or bad I'm doing. Yes, when the set is done, you can generally gauge how well you've done by the NPC and bystander reactions, and there is also a numerical scorecard, but I would love some kind of total scoring, so I can see what my score is versus the total possible score. For now, I'm just enjoying the story and the setting, and seeing where it's going to take me next. If you decide to join me on that journey, then I thank you and hope you find it enjoyable. If you decide to get off here and now, then I appreciate you following me this far. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please feel free to check out my other videos. And if you want to leave a like or a subscribe to the channel, that would be great as well. In the meantime, I want to thank those of you that watched this video, and I hope to see you all again for part 3 and 4 of my Dustborn retrospective. Thanks for watching.